Today we have a guest with us, a friend of SusMafia, Mr. Rajesh Kasturirangan. He is an awesome guy. He's the founder of Socratus Foundation based in Bangalore, but he lives in Cambridge, Boston, Cambridge, out of MIT. He's the ex-founder of ClimateX, which was an open learning project that MIT was running, which is now, I believe, evolved into climate.mit.edu. He is a certified green warrior, in our opinion, going after very, very similar problems and filling in a lot of the gaps that we haven't even thought about addressing. They have described their vision as being the midwife of collective wisdom, addressing wicked problems for this decade and century. I think that's just a super optimistic stance in a world full of so much negativity. And that's one of the very strong reasons I love aligning with Rajesh. This is a project that he's pitching today as a SusShot, every SusShot being a sustainable moonshot, a project that if it were to succeed would have massive impact, but essentially starts off as a low-cost, creative, collaborative bet. So today, Rajesh is bringing a food system SusShot collaboration between SusMafia and Socrates to the table. Over to you, Rajesh. The next 30 minutes are yours, followed by Q&A and a show of hands of whoever's interested in joining this SusShot.
Thank you, Anirudh, and thank you for the really kind introduction. I don't have much more to say about myself. So Socrates, I'll tell you the main thing. We believe that scaling people is easier than scaling problems. So when we say we are the midwives of wisdom, what we're also saying is that we engage, whatever we do it around the people in the communities that we're trying to address. Now that could be, in this case, SusMafia, and therefore a collaboration with SusMafia would be building around the needs of the SusMafia community. Now let's see if I can. So that's the food systems SusShot. And I mean, so food systems is something that Socrates has been working pretty intensively even before it started existing. So the first thing that we did was an event on farmer income a little over a year ago, when Socrates actually was not an official organization. And the question has always been, can India become the world capital of sustainable food? And when I say that, I mean, food systems are going to change dramatically in this century. Climate change, of course, is going to be the biggest reason, but there will be other reasons too. And so let me start with the background. And Anirudh, I also, if I'm going over time, just give me a 2-minute warning. Okay. Now, if you look at the early 20th century, right, people thought that deprivation is going to be solved for good. Bertrand Russell and the people who were at that time ruling India were also thinking that maybe technology and scientific advances will just end poverty for good, right? And in fact, people will only work 3 or 4 hours a day. And none of that has turned out to be true, and even though many of those technological predictions have come true. So strangely enough, despite dramatic advances in science and technology, despite institutional capacities, poverty hasn't gone away, inequality hasn't gone away, all the traditional injustices have not gone away. And so the strange thing is, why has deprivation not gone away despite our capacity to do so? So we, as a species, and even as a country in India, we have the capacity to have a flourishing world, but we don't actually have done it. Why can't we all be Sweden, so to speak, right? And one of the things that we always say, so incidentally, if you ask Americans, who are a wealthy country, but a much more individualistic country, if they would like to be Sweden or not, many of them would say no. But then if you ask them, if you're going to be old and sick, what is the kind of system that they would like to live in? It turns out that they prefer Sweden. The Nordic world seems to have solved certain problems about human flourishing that the rest of humanity seems to have not yet done so. But, all that prosperity, even in Sweden, is carbon prosperity. I mean, the single biggest source of income for, say, Norway is oil. right? And so even the Nordic miracle cannot be replicated elsewhere, and it certainly cannot be the way we imagine our future. And so then the question arises, how will India flourish in this era of climate change? That's our biggest question. We call that our green up. So it's our SusShot of all SusShots, right? It's call it green up. Can India flourish by circumventing the carbon economy altogether? And when I say circumventing, if you think about it, the big thing that we have done, so to speak, is we have circumvented the landline economy and become the mobile economy, for better or worse, right? Most Indians never experienced a handheld landline phone set, and most Indians have experienced a mobile phone set. So this is a huge kind of revolution in the communications world. Similarly, can we have a revolution in the energy world? And one big thing in that, and which is the shot that I'm going to be pitching here, is this sustainable food system. India has traditionally been an agrarian civilization. So food and the production of food and the culture around food is the single biggest thing that Indians have experienced for over probably 3,000 to 4,000 years, right? And so a big part of that is going to be how can our farmers live lives of dignity? Sure that the people who are least capable of taking advantage of the situation are actually their needs are privileged first. And so whatever we do in a sustainable, creating a sustainable food system should not make the lives of marginal farmers in particular worse, right? And in fact, we want them to live lives of dignity. Then the second question, of course, is how to do it in the presence of shrinking resources, right? Water is the single biggest example, but there will be any number of other resources. Soil fertility is a huge issue, not just in India, but in other parts of the world. How can we create a sustainable food system that is not depleting and leaching our soils is a big question. From the SusShot perspective, but from my perspective also as a person who deeply cares about the non-human world, how can we eliminate the suffering that we are now increasingly causing to the non-human world, especially animals, in the process of creating a new food system, right? Because when we say industrialized food production, that's all both industrialized plant food production and industrialized animal food production. And the animal food production causes immense suffering to animals. And there's absolutely no reason we should be doing that, right? And so those are the questions we want to address within Socrates. And the way we want to do it is what we say, only wicked minds solve wicked problems, right? And food systems challenges are all wicked problems. When I say wicked problems, they are problems where there is a physical material complexity associated with them. If you're creating a new food system for 1.3 billion people, you want to make sure that the distribution works, the capacity to produce that food works, and so on and so forth. It also has tremendous moral complexity because then the question is, who gets to access to which food? How are we privileging the kinds of foods that we produce, and so on and so forth, right? And that needs a kind of sustained engagement across both of those channels. And then the only way we think we can solve problems is through engaging with the political sphere. And what I mean by that is, in the Indian context, for food systems, I mean, as you know, agriculture is a huge political issue. There are farmers protesting all the time. So we have to be aware of the political context in which something like food production is going to happen. Otherwise, it's going to be a wicked problem that we can't solve. Right. So here is an example of something that we did, in fact, just about a month ago now. And this is a food system. So these are some of the tools that we have built to address this. So I'm going to show food systems kind of a simulation. We call it a sensome that we have done. So here, so So this is a chopal, like a village chopal. So imagine, right? So here are all these people sitting here. So again, this illustrates how we kind of design our problems around the people whose challenges we have to address. Right? And so this gives us a way to sort of really reimagine something like the fertilizer subsidy. So India gives about 100,000 crore rupees a year in fertilizer subsidy, right? And that's not a, just urea's carbon emissions alone are about 50% of India's transportation sector. So then the question is, can you recast the fertilizer subsidy in a way that it benefits the environment, it benefits farmers, and it benefits, in this case, the government. Right? So that, I'm going to pause this. Oops, sorry. And see if I can. And then I'm going to show you the kind of results that came out of this. So this is a data-driven scenario builder, again, that we purpose built for this fertilizer subsidy work.
This is Rajasthan, right?
This is Rajasthan in Jaipur. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so I don't want to bore you with these videos. Why I showed those is that whenever we take up a problem at Socrates, we build tools around the needs of the community that wants to address them, right? So in the previous case, the stakeholders were the primarily actually the government, but then farmer representatives. There were a couple of farm union leaders there, politicians and others, for whom addressing what to do with this fertilizer subsidy requires, in the back end, a series of tools so that we can bring that problem to the community, to that group, in a way that they can all sort of align themselves. And so that's sort of the problem-solving method that we bring to any issue. And that's what I'm hoping that we can do with the SusMafia community for our food system, SusShot, right? And so this is the Socrates partnership model. So we have a left-hand side, which is primarily sort of learning and teaching, right? And some of you in this group might have heard that we are currently actually doing a course on imagining India's future in the era of climate change. So that's already happening. And on the right-hand side are the specific problems that we are going to address. And food systems is one of them. And the way we do it is through these series of spaces and create a kind of a lab. So what I am really hoping for Socrates over the next year is that we kind of become something like an MIT Media Lab, but for India's future and India's sustainable future in particular, right? Which is to say that it's a space in which technology, design, learning how to think very carefully and subtly about wicked problems, but with a very sharp focus on intervening in the field and making the world different, right? That's sort of our goal. And so my proposal for a food system SusShot with SusMafia, okay, is number one, how cool would it be if we could do a food systems lab together, right? So Socrates is already in the process of creating a lab for our fertilizer subsidy work, which was there in the two videos. We are already developing certain kinds of tools. So that's happening anyway. But I'm saying, can we build on that and create especially for something like alternative protein, can we create a group here that would be sort of, it would take a project of, bringing the right set of tools to the right set of people, the right set of technologies to jumpstart what I think can be India's perhaps most important contribution to food systems in the world, which is how do we get enough protein into our hands and into our stomachs? To me, that's the single biggest challenge. India is a very protein, you could say, we are mostly having much less protein than we need to. And therefore, there is a huge demand for cheap protein. Unfortunately, cheap protein, let's say if it involves eggs or chicken, is really, really harmful both to the environment and to animals, and in the long run to farmers themselves. And so we have this opportunity to create an entirely new protein landscape. And India is actually really well suited for it because we have a long history of growing lentils and other kind of plant-based proteins. But that's sort of, it's not surprising that a company like Impossible Foods has grown from nothing to over $1 billion in valuation in just a couple of years. So can we do that in India? To me, that's the single biggest challenge. But in the way to do it in the Socrates way would be to create a wicked community, a community that understands that building an alternative protein ecosystem will require understanding the needs of farmers, will understand looking at the capacity of our farmlands across the country to grow those kinds of crops, and then eventually, of course, understanding the market for it, the export market for it, the new technologies, all of those things. So can we do this together? To me, that's the single biggest question that I want to pose here. So a bold proposal to make India the world capital of alternative protein, building upon a long history of agriculture, but now understanding the new markets and business models that are coming up. It can be a great export market, actually. A deep engagement with the new technologies. Especially if you're in Bangalore, biotech is big. And I believe that the kind of technologies that have been used for pharmaceuticals can be repurposed for alternative foods. So can we therefore create the right technology environment for it? And then, of course, people don't put anything that you put in front of them into their mouths and stomachs. You have to change food behaviors and food culture. So there's an opportunity, therefore, for a kind of a behavior science-driven new eating habits. Okay, so what do we need to make this happen? We, of course, need agriculture expertise, people who know how to grow the right kind of food. We need retail and business model expertise. We need biotech expertise. We need finance expertise. So I believe that ultimately the single biggest lack right now is in financing and in the right business models. And then, of course, in order to make it happen, we need to have a really so we need to have access to the right kind of data sets and how to use data in a profound and clever way to grow the right kinds of foods that we need to do in the future, right? And this is just my list. I'm sure there are many others, and I'm not a business person by training, and therefore I will defer to people in the SusMafia who have those kinds of skill sets. But I would love to connect with the right set of people. And the way we do our work, and I'm just going to go quickly back to this system here, is that we start with a convening. We call that a wicked sprint. That's the space. And so my goal is that we create a working group now. We raise funds for a wicked sprint or a convening, which brings the right set of people to the alternative protein space or more broadly, the food system space. That would be April 2021. And then of course we raise some more money. And then can we launch our first product in November 2021? That seems maybe too ambitious or not ambitious enough. So I am going to defer to your judgment on that, but who's in?
Thank you, Rajesh. Perfect timing. This was super, super well presented. And I just want to reflect back on the word that you used very early in the SusShot presentation, which is about dignity. Attaching dignity to climate work and sustainability. And I particularly am going after this concept now, one of the many ambitious ideas for this decade, which is, can we move India from becoming a basic customs duty nation to a basic climate dignity nation? So how about we replace what that acronym BCD means, right? Bring climate dignity, basic climate dignity. Like we have
I like that.
Yeah. And for that reason, for that very, very simple reason, I'm on board for this project because I think food is a gateway to, to behavior change. If you can create very interesting food systems solutions, it becomes a larger threshold for societal change. And not just that, it also becomes an engine for making India the world's solution, food system solution, which aligns with both of our missions. So count me in. I'd like to now open it up for the rest of the group that we have. The format that we can follow is, if you would like to speak, please just drop any word in the chat box. I can call on you in order. Otherwise, it tends to be a little bit chaotic. So just say I want to speak, or like raise your hand or whatever. We have Ananda first.
Should I stop sharing my screen so that we can?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
And after Ananda, please just drop a word in the chat box. I can call out on you. And we'll do this for the next 30 minutes. The goal is to see who is interested in joining this project. The critical mass for this project is about 8 people between Socratus and SusMafia and any external stakeholder. And then we'll kick it off and then bring on the right stakeholders as the project grows.
Okay, thank you, Anirudh, for giving me this chance. Rajesh sir, thank you so much for your presentation, and really glad that somebody is addressing the basic problem. Farmers are a lot who are very much ignored, I feel, and who are facing the most of the brunt of climate change. I mean, it's a pity that the people who literally feed us go to bed hungry every night and committing suicides in big numbers because of climate change, and nobody is talking about it. Whereas if a couple of people are killed on the streets of Paris, the entire world stands up, and we are losing around 15,000 farmers a year. So really glad that you want to address this fundamental issue. And I am also on board, even though it is a bit unclear that fundraising will be happening for the system or a product is a bit unclear to me. But I would like to be part of it. I have a bit of a fundraising experience for startups who are in the sustainability sector in the UK. So would like to brainstorm more on this.
Great. Thanks, Ananda.
Whoever would like to speak next, you can just drop a word in the chat box. Yeah, Mr. Khatri. So Mr. Khatri is an ex-sustainability officer and champion from ITC.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, Adab. We are a very diverse country, so I am greeting all of you in a most diverse way and inclusive way. I'd like to talk on an initiative which I started in 2016 in Koppal district of Karnataka. I went there to take a session for the hearing and speech impaired people on sustainable development. I went with a preconceived notion and took my pen drive, but when I saw the reality there, I threw my pen drive in the dustbin and started talking to them extempore. So for those of you who don't know Koppal, it's a very harsh region. The soil was very poor, very hot, uh, energy problems, water problems, you name it. And most important issue, there was a problem of malnourishment. But malnourishment afflicts India, 60% population. So the NGO that I was working with, I told them that, look, government of India cannot do everything. We need to find cost-effective methods of creating a pilot which will get scaled up and will get replicated and get viralized over a period of time. Having said this, this NGO had the luxury of land over there. I told them to grow saplings of moringa, guava, banana, papaya, and amla, so that if Anirudh is living as a poor person in a hut over there, he gets 5 of these saplings. And in the span of 4 to 14 months, these plants will grow and start fruiting and help them to get a better nutritional food than what they eat. So if Anirudh is a poor guy in the south, he'll be eating rice with chili, and the north, he'll be eating a roti with chili. Instead of that, you're migrating them through something which is right behind their house. And the collateral benefits of this approach to food is that we increase green cover in the country. We have only 29 trees, vis-a-vis China has 106 trees per person, according to United Nations, and Canada has 7,000 trees per person. So our green cover is in pathetic condition, and if you can do it through the malnourishment route, nothing like it. And once the number of these trees increase across India in millions, then you also bring back the birds and the bees back. It's a soil binder. It helps to harvest water. And there are so many other co-benefits. So from one village, it went to about 6 villages in 2016. Didn't excite me at all. Then there was a hiatus of a gap of 4 years. And then in COVID times, I got hold of a NGO whom I worked with about 120 NGOs in Bangalore. One of them focuses on rural kids 65 kilometers away from Bangalore in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. And I told them, just don't teach ABCD to the children. Can you make them dirty their feet and wet their hands at early age and let them plant the saplings that I requested him to buy? And between July and 31st October, we've rolled out this initiative in 34 villages. If that excites me, no, it doesn't excite me. Oot ke muh mein jeera, for the benefit of those who don't know Hindi, is just a small cumin seed in the camel's mouth. So then I networked with a very cross section of people, right from...
Mr. Khatri, sorry.
Yes, how many minutes you got?
Sorry to interject. I want to keep it really snappy and short.
Okay.
So that we get like as much of a round table as possible.
Fair enough. So you give me how much? 1 minute?
Really short and say, you know, what you found intriguing, ideally a question, and if you're in, and then we can build once we do have a crew together.
Okay. So, okay, I think I've told you the story and my intent. I would like to see how we can scale this up with the very ingenious minds that we have in this group. Thank you.
I feel like there are a couple of chat comments I see.
Shashi Nagarajan. Shashi?
Hi. Yeah, so I'm super excited about everything that Rajesh speaks. I also believe in plant diet for people. Of course, I hope they also like it. And yeah, have some data science skills to bring. I'm also interested in making agriculture better, farmer livelihoods better, the world greener, and all of that. So yeah, if you'll have me, I'll like to contribute.
Great. Nice to see you here, Shashi. Shashi interned with me many years ago. So we have a...
Yeah. I think Hari wants to say something.
Yeah, so just very, very briefly, thanks, Rajesh. I'm seeing you at multiple places, including your course, which is nice. And I appreciate your approach. So I worked on food security and was actually like improving outcomes in the public distribution system as part of something which I worked on for about 2 years. So I have a deep interest in this, and I also recently turned vegan. So I'm actually interested in it from both my own like food completeness as well as in the PDS. The food basket is very monocultured, and that definitely needs to improve, especially in this situation after COVID when there is severe duress on the whole system, including with the new bills which are being introduced and disruption in that corner. So I think I can probably come on board, and if I can enable from the perspective of business model design, and perhaps I can help out on research, and also ecosystem connects to people who are working in the food systems, including, for example, Kavita Kurganti, who's food systems, including people who are working like Asha, for example, which is the farmers movement, and groups working on permaculture and other diversification methods, and as well
So
as
Kavita is somebody we know quite well, just so you know.
Okay, good. So you should be knowing her if you're working this domain.
Yeah.
So I also was, engaged in advocacy with the Department of Food and Civil Supplies, and I know people who are interested in this, and I believe I could probably enable this solution to some extent if I joined the working group meetings. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Hari.
Super, Hari. So I just want to reflect back on, Rajesh, what you did share. It was an agricultural expertise, retail and business model expertise, biotech expertise, financing expertise, data science expertise, plus many others I don't know about, which I think is really where that gold mine is going to lie, right? So many different angles and so many stakeholders who find the right stage. I want to ask you a question at this stage, which is there's this whole alternative meat protein boom waiting to happen, right? We've all heard about impossible foods and largely they're classified in the plant-based and tissue culture-based approaches, right? How sustainable are those two approaches? How real are they? What's the progress so far? And where is India in it currently? If you had to really pick like one area to start building, hypothetically, if you could describe a prototype, what would that prototype be?
Okay, so let me start with the last bit because I think that kind of perhaps unravels some of the other stuff. I think that dairy alternatives are, so in fact, I had a slide which I then took out because I didn't think I would make it, which is that if you look at Operation Flood, which is, iconic cooperative movement that really increased the production of milk, and Mother Dairy, Nandini, all of those are products that came out of Operation Flood, right? And so I believe that the time is ripe for milks that are plant-based milks as a way to bring the same kind of benefit to the farmer. So the cooperative movement should still, that mentality of keeping farmer dignities as it still stays, but you replace some of the input sources, in this particular case, animal-based milk with plant-based milks. And so, for example, cashew is a good example because cashew can be grown with much less water. So that brings us to the sustainability question. And I think that we'll have to do it case by case. I don't think there's a blanket answer to that question. But for example, I think that focusing on cashew-based milks, India is already the biggest producer of cashew, and the cashew-based milks are byproducts of the cashew production, right? And so those are to me, that's an example of a very specific product that could use the existing infrastructure. So for example, the pasteurization techniques and the existing pasteurization. So it turns out that if you want to rent a milk pasteurization place for a day, they'll just rent it out to you. and they'll just clean it before and after so that you run cashew milk rather than cow milk through it. And so there are existing systems. And so the lowest hanging fruit to me is things where the plant-based alternative is just entering into a very specific slot into a distribution and production system that already exists, right? So that's and that's something that we thought about a little bit 6 months or so ago. I mean, but of course, COVID made it much harder for us to do any of that work, right? I think that the kind of large scale stuff that Impossible Foods and others are doing, I am still not convinced about that sustainability. And but partly, of course, you know, those are producing for Western markets. India, we are not looking for replacing beef burgers with plant-based burgers. I mean, that's not, I think, where our protein needs are. So I actually don't know how to think through the actual marketing and what kind of products will an Impossible Food alternative look like in India. Of course, if it's an export market, then it can just be plugging into what Impossible Food wants to do in California.
Got it. Anybody else? The floor is open. If you'd like to speak or opt in or ask a question, you can drop a word in the chat box and I'll call on you. And just for clarity's sake, this will be a project between Socratus and SusMafia. Yeah. We do have the momentum from two foundations to drive this seemingly abstract project. All wicked problems and SusShots begin with abstract problems. That's why Rajesh actually began. The question he poses, how cool would it be if we could?
If we could create a food systems lab together. To me, that's the, right, on an alternative protein lab together. How's that?
There's no one right way for this, but we'll get there. So, if there are no immediate questions, there are a couple of people in the call who have Ravi, you're building a food and energy nexus right now, right? Ravi Kumar, who runs Dexla Energies, using solar energy to essentially make it a third cash crop.
Yes.
Your addition to this.
Yeah. Thanks, Rajesh. I mean, I joined in a little late, so I didn't get the chance to hear all of your thoughts and vision on this one, but I did get the gist and you did close it out at the end. And I think it's a great idea with regard to alternative protein and the food needs. Interestingly, it's also a subject which is something closer to our ecosystem, which is also part of our current startup ecosystem that we have internally in the organization that I'm working for. There is a current initiative underway which is looking at bringing in plant-based meat alternatives for the Indian cuisine. And while that's pretty early, I also am not involved on a day-to-day basis, so I don't have enough view or the understanding to speak about it. But I do understand that the potential is huge, and the ability to impact both the food choices as well as the outcomes in terms of sustainability, I understand are pretty good. I think that's also an exciting space. When Ani did mention, I immediately had a smile on my face, and I thought, yeah, and that is something that I probably have to get a better understanding on. The other thing that we are working on is basically finding ways to bring farming back to the solar plants that are already out there. While we haven't found a scientific way to explore what kind of crops work best for what kind of regions as yet, but our work is more, if I were to just simplify it a little bit, what we are trying to do is to make agriculture work for an ecosystem as a context where farming is seen as completely ruled out typically. And when solar panels are stuck on the ground where usually farming happens, it essentially is losing out to energy. And while it is arguable as to what is the extent and what is the impact and what is the gain in terms of environmental benefits, we still believe that it can be done in a better way, and there can be a good opportunity to synergize that, or rather the word that is used is food energy in excess, could be better than what it is today. So we've been experimenting a little bit with few crops, less in terms of suitability or the nature of a crop that is useful for the local communities, rather more in terms of how can we put it to better use. So I don't know, I'm happy to understand a little bit more, and if you have some thoughts, and separately catch up and ideate a little bit more on what we can do there and how we can make it more useful for the local communities as well, not just purely from a commercial point of view. So yeah, I'd be happy to contribute in any way. I mean, I can jump in, though I'm not coming from the food science background, or I don't understand agriculture fully. Very little understanding of agriculture. Whatever I've learned because of this particular initiative that we're doing. But I'm happy to come in, and if there is any brainstorming session that's happening, and just contribute in whichever way I can.
Thank you, Ravi. So there was a little bit of research that came out recently around what is protein requirement in India, right? And particularly in the meat context, in the alternative meat context, how would people consume these alternatives if they were to come out? Would it be a parallel of meat burgers or meat steaks? And by and large, I don't know how they came to this determination, but it was that alternative meat served in the biryani form would be the ideal starting point, right? So there are different entry dishes for alternative meat, and then there are different forms of protein, right, as gateways into people's diets. So I love that you split it between just the meat form and also the milk form, the cashew milk and the other forms of protein, because in the alternative food systems, we forget about that. We have been obsessively focusing on, oh, look at those two companies that are killing it on the American stock markets, right?
Yeah. And I think it makes sense that biryani is a good gateway, because again, the texture of alternative meat currently favors the minced and variety much more than things that look like a solid block.
Absolutely.
So
Ganesh, you're up next.
Yeah. So Rajesh, I hope you don't mind. I took some screenshot of your presentation and put it in the SusMafia group. For the people who are not attending, at least they let the attract. So
I'm happy to just share the presentation. It's not a problem.
Yeah, no, I just thought to create the live feeling for people who are not able to. That is one thing. Yeah, and of course, I have not worked extensively or even to an extent in agriculture, except that Hari and myself wrote a paper on agriculture we presented at Berkeley, but that was more on the instrumentation of agriculture and things, not exactly on the protein side. But I work in the side of industrial water management. And in fact, most of our customers are in food processing industry, but we focus on reducing water wastage, and so in the industry. So if there's any, this one, I can give, I'll be happy to connect to the industry. Like we work with industries like Britannia's of the world and Lactalis, all those things. I mean, the dairy industry. So if there is any thing where we could involve, I'll be happy to be involved. Apart from that, I would also like to share, you might already be aware of this. You may be knowing Deshpande Center in MIT, right?
Yes.
So we are part of their India operations, that is in Hubli, that's the hometown of Gururaj Deshpande. We are incubated there, and this center's focus is 1 billion people working in second tier and third tier cities, right?
I see.
So I think there's a lot of synergy, because I keep hearing their vision, and I keep getting the mails of the speakers in this ecosystem. So I think happy to connect people there if you're already not connected to the Hubli side. I'm sure you'll be connected to the MIT side. But I know there's one person called Vivek Par, is the head of, or rather the director, CEO of Deshpande Foundation. I think happy to connect because many of your goals are aligned to what they're trying to do, right? And agriculture.
Thanks. I mean, I think that in particular for alternative meats as well as maybe even more so for dairy alternatives, engaging with the commercial sector, the Britannias, because they know how to place their products on the retail shelves, right? So that understanding and partnership is going to be crucial. And of course, connection to Deshpande is always welcome.
Okay, I'll share this video to them since Anirudh is going to anyway put that in YouTube. I'll happy to make the connection. Okay, I'll write to you, and based on the people whom I can potentially connect, and upon your this one consent, I can make the introduction.
Okay, thank you.
So oftentimes what happens, I mean, not oftentimes, this is literally like a new concept that we have kicked off also 3 months ago. Shots. But one of the learnings from the previous one, the plastic one that we're running, and it's still going on, is we get a few of the stakeholder buy-ins, and as the project kicks off, we attract the right external stakeholders on board that project. And I believe that will actually happen right now because a lot of like our own mafiosos are coming to my mind who feed one piece of the puzzle, right? So largely, I remember telling you, we don't really have too many people in the food systems space, but individual pieces, like Ravi, for example, on the food energy nexus, right? And then somebody else on the hydroponics nexus. Similarly, I think there'll be value additions from independent people as the project builds. But one that's coming to my mind for sure is the Good Food Institute, who we are not affiliated with. But I think you are.
You know, in fact, I've written op-eds with Varun Deshpande, who's there.
They're really at the forefront of alternative meats.
Yeah. So that's what I would definitely bring them into this conversation for sure.
Awesome. And just one more question, I guess, which I think tends to be on a lot of minds during COVID, is when you say prototyping in the COVID world, how you can keep building projects, but you can't take it to market and actually experiment on the ground. What do you do with it, right? So how are we de-risking from the COVID impact?
I can't. So if you go back to the timeline, so the first thing we want to do is this convening, right? Because and so I'm giving us 6 months between now and then to primarily work online together for but a physical convening like what we did in Jaipur. And if COVID is still as big in March, April as it is today, we'll just have to take a different call on rollout. I mean, I feel like you can't risk people's own health and well-being to do something like this, but I'm hoping that we have much better news about COVID in 6 months than we do today. I feel that especially in the food systems world where you are in close quarters with others, we have to be kind of careful. So
geographically, do you have a preference for a particular market, or is it open to anywhere in the country?
At this, I feel like it's open right now. I mean, like we should do it based on sharp-eyed calculations rather than decide beforehand. So meaning if there's the right expertise to say, here is how one thinks about where to launch this, I am going to defer to that over my own preferences.
Awesome. Got it. Any other questions or any other buy-ins? What we're asking for is an hour a week minimum for the next 3 months. So if you think you're willing to make that commitment, please get on board. We'll be happy to have you. Shashi says yes. Hari says yes.
Rajesh, I think we should try to apply for grant funding, for example, from Roddenberry Foundation and so on and so forth. They cover plant-based diets as part of their environment tracks. I can drop a link if you want.
Please. Sorry, who is talking right now? I don't see.
Sorry, that was me, Rajesh. Hari.
Oh, Hari. Okay. Absolutely. Is this the same as the Gene Roddenberry? It must be, right?
Yeah, they have a foundation and they have a prize. So the prize covers environment, which covers plant-based diets.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Why not?
Anybody else? We have 5 more minutes for your thoughts if you would like to join in. Otherwise, I think we are good to go with this project and bring in the right stakeholders as it evolves. But the earlier we have you on board, the better it really tends to be.